Hi, and welcome back to Politodoxy. I'm your host, Aaron Friedman. Today I have the pleasure to have a discussion with Robert Spencer, who is a director of Jihad Watch and an author of 28 books, and somebody I have come to admire based on your argumentation on the validity of Islam. And you have I must say, you have very interesting arguments regarding Muhammad, as we'll get into that, which I found outrageously interesting. It is highly entertaining, if true. So let's first start with the easier stuff, and we'll go into the more deeper, hard-hitting stuff. So you have been a great critic of Islam, and that comes with a danger as well, since I will just lay out the differences between the three major religions: Islam, Judaism, Christianity. Judaism is built upon questions. It's questions upon questions upon questions. Christianity is a little less, but you're allowed to ask questions. You're allowed to critique. Islam, it seems as though you're not even allowed to critique. You're not allowed to ask any questions on the fundamental basis of Muhammad. You're allowed to ask questions: is this haram, or is this halal? That is fine. You can ask those kinds of, but you can't ask questions and critique of Muhammad. Otherwise, you put yourself in danger, and you have put yourself at the forefront of being in danger of the peaceful community. Let's put it that way. So, what have you seen? I mean, is it a lot? Is it a little? Have they taken notice of you? Tell me what it is like when being a critic of Islam.
Oh, well, I've gotten thousands of death threats, literally. For a while, the last few years, it was one a day, although I haven't heard from the guy in a few weeks. But there was one guy who every day was sending me new death threats. There are others who come and go. Usually it's a one-off, but I've gotten many, many death threats, many attempts to frighten me into silence, saying, if you appear at this place where you're set to speak, you won't walk out, or we've followed you home, we know where you are, things like that. And, you just have to go about your business. There's nothing you can do about it. But the thing is, they traffic in intimidation. Certainly they are lethal. They will kill you if they get a chance. But much more commonly, they just want to intimidate you and scare you into stopping, which of course they will never do with me.
That is good. That is good to hear. So why is that, though? What is look, with Judaism, it's based upon questions. Everything is questioned. The most Jewish thing a Jew can do is answer a question with another question. There's another saying that you have two Jews in a room and five opinions. So Judaism is built on that. Christianity a little less, but nobody's going to kill you for questioning Jesus. Nobody's going to kill you. They're going to, have a normal, well-civilized debate. But when it comes to Islam, it is absolutely, you can't do it. And if you do, then you put yourself in danger. What is the mentality behind that? Why not welcome vigorous critiques? Why not welcome that? Say, you see how powerful Islam is? We're not afraid of any critiques. You can question it, and it stands on its own validity. Why? What's with this? Why the danger?
Aaron, it comes straight from the Quran. And the Quran says in chapter 5, verse 101, "O you who believe, do not ask about things which, if they were made known to you, would trouble you. But if you ask about them while the Quran is being revealed, they will be made known to you. Allah forgives this, for Allah is forgiving, merciful. A people before you asked, and then became unbelievers." So you see what that's saying. Don't ask about things that would trouble you if you knew the answer, because some people became unbelievers in the past when they asked questions. You can ask questions while the Quran is being revealed, which of course no Muslim can do anymore. But supposedly at the time that this was written, you could ask and Allah would just tell you. But nowadays you have to go along, because if you question, you risk, as the verse just said, you risk losing your faith altogether.
So that is the danger. The danger is of losing the faith. Yes. That is what I find it to be fascinating, because as I'm going to reiterate myself, that if you are secure within your own religion, you should have no problem somebody else making a claim about it. But yet, here's what I see when I have listen, I've not actually read the Quran because I don't know. It doesn't strike me as a well. It doesn't strike me as a well time. If I would be wasting my time, that's what I feel. Although I do listen to the critiques of Islam, I do listen to debates of Islam on both sides, so I do get a good grasp of what is actually being discussed. So I do, and furthermore, I do not speak of issues that I don't know of. So that is why I have you on here, because I want to, somebody who actually knows. So this is what it seems to me, somebody who has not read the Quran. I want to be clear for everybody to understand where I'm coming from, but somebody who has done enough, I think, sufficient research by listening to debates, listening to other critiques of Islam. It seems as though Muhammad just made it up as he went. And of course he said, as far as I recall, he said that at first he thought it was a demon speaking to him, but then, oh no, it was actually the word of God. So I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Actually, Muhammad, you're onto something there. Let's go with that. But apparently, no, he said that, no, it's the word of God. But it seems as though he just made it up as he went. And case in point, and I want to hear what you have to say about this. This one is the most striking to me, is when, I don't remember which one of Muhammad's followers said that women should cover up. Women cover up. And Muhammad said, no, it's not necessary. Then, out of nowhere, Muhammad one day wakes up and says, you know what? Women need to start covering up. It's as though Muhammad was badgered into, oh, you got to do this for me. Do it for me. Do it for your best friend. I don't remember his name. Do it for me. And Muhammad then acquiesced and did it for him. And that is where I was like, okay, so this guy's just making it up as he goes. So what do you think about this?
Well, there are two possibilities. One is exactly what you're saying, that he was indeed a fake and that he was lying, misleading his followers, and dealing with their particular issues as time went by in a way that would entangle him in contradictions. And so he came up with the idea of abrogation to settle the contradictions, that what comes later cancels what comes earlier if they disagree with each other, and all this nonsense like that. And you're right that he was not at all comforted. He was not at all exalted or inspired when he first received the revelation. According to Islamic tradition, this is not in the Quran, but in the Hadith, Muhammad went home. He was very upset after his first encounter with the being who was later identified as the angel Gabriel. And he said, woe is me, either poet or possessed. That he thought he was possessed by a demon, or that he was a poet, which essentially was saying he was crazy, because they thought that people who would spout poetry were out of their heads. So that's the choice he thought. He did not think it was a positive experience. Now, the other possibility, however, is that all of this is fake and that it's all fiction. And that the reason why we have stories about Muhammad being not sure and the whole idea of abrogation and so on is because this is a fictional story being elaborated by a group of different factions of a group. And so they had different versions, they had different ideas, they had different practices that they wanted to sanctify by attributing to the prophet and so on. And so they would disagree with one another, and then the disagreements had to be explained away. And so various stories were made up that would explain away the disagreements. Like if Muhammad is allowing women to go unveiled, that is, if the women in the Islamic community are going unveiled, and then later on the order comes to veil, well, you have to explain why the change. So you make up the story about Umar badgering him, and finally he gives in.
Yeah, Umar. Yeah, now I remember. At first, I thought it was Abdul. I don't know if if Abdul was one of his followers, but at first I thought it was him. But no, it was Umar. So this is where it really gets me. The making up stuff. That was like the turning point of listening to one of the critiques of Islam. This was the turning point as, oh, okay. So it's not just him. I don't know, whatever it is. I don't know what would lead somebody to write a book on religion, because I'm not somebody who does that. But I don't know what it takes. But at this point, I was like, okay, so this guy is clearly making it up as he goes. But I'm also conflicted with the other part, which you brought up, of the demon. That this is so inherently evil, and we're gonna get into this. I'm not just throwing out words of, oh, I'm gonna villainize Islam just because I don't like it. It's not a secret that I don't like Islam, but I'm not just gonna villainize it because that. We will talk about the specifics in a moment, but this is so inherently evil that this could only be made from a demon. As a matter of fact, one of the great rabbis, Maimonides, who was actually he was a doctor to the king of Cairo, and he was in Islamic territory when he wrote this, and he said that he called Muhammad the madman. So that is that takes guts to be writing this down. He wrote it in Hebrew, so I don't think there would have been too much of a threat from Islam. They wouldn't have picked up on it. But still, it takes some guts to be able to describe Muhammad as a madman in the center of Islamic life, which was at the time it was Cairo or I think it was under the Seljuk Turks. I don't remember, but it was it was one of the main centers. So. What do you? I want to know. What are you leaning towards more? Is it Muhammad just making it up to enrich himself? Because on one side you could say that he had endless amounts of sex slaves. He just killed his enemies just because he felt like it. He just stole people's money just because. Is it because of self enrichment, or is it because this is actually just demon spawned writings of a demon? Is it?
Well, you understand,
is it this?
those could both be true. That Muhammad is a false prophet who is making all this up because he understands that if the people around him think he's a prophet, then he's going to lead a charmed life where they're waiting on him hand and foot and they give him everything he wants. And so he makes up these revelations and poses as a prophet and explains away the difficulties and contradictions and so on. And it could also be simultaneously possible that this was an opening on the part of the forces of evil to sanctify evil behavior and make people think when they were doing evil that they were doing good. Like the prophet Isaiah says, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil," and that they took advantage of the situation of this false prophet. But there's also another possibility that I suggested before, and that is what I think, since you asked what I think. I don't think Muhammad existed at all. I think he's a made-up character.
We are jumping the gun. We are jumping the gun on this one because, this is good. Yeah, let's get into that. As a matter of fact, let's get into that. That Muhammad not existing. I want to preface this with what I think, because this is an extraordinary claim and it's gonna upset a lot of people. And you know what? It kind of upsets me as well, but not in a negative way. Just it upsets it. It triggers me to rethink this entire thing, that Muhammad not existing, because for me it's very hard to believe that somebody who had that, a character of that sort would be invented just so I'm gonna let you say this, but it's hard for me to believe that a character of that caliber to be invented with all the negatives of his life, taking sex slaves, having how many wives he had, the endless amount of killing, pillaging, all the other quotes, all the other things. It's hard for me to say that, okay, that person didn't actually exist, because these are a lot of negative attributes. So if somebody would want to make up a character and to say, oh, and profess the beauties of one's religion, they would try to say, oh, look at the glory of this, look at how wonderful these quotes are, but yet we see terrible quotes, we see terrible behavior. So this is why it's very hard for me to grasp the idea that Muhammad didn't exist. But I want you to put out, okay, so you're saying Muhammad didn't exist, and I want you to put out why that is, and then address my concern about the negative attributes of Muhammad.
Yeah, well, you're quite right, Aaron, that that's the strongest argument in favor of his actually existing, that he does so many terrible things, and you would think that if they were trying to create an idealized character who would be the hero and the central figure of their community, then they would have done a better job of it, made somebody more admirable. But that presupposes that these people have the same values that people have nowadays, and that you and I may have, when actually that's not a given. They may have been making up an ideal character, but that's the ideals that they valued. And so they put them into their hero. Stealing, killing, raping, those were the things they wanted to do. And they thought they were good. So they put them into their hero figure. This is all explained at length, actually, if you'll pardon me. I have a new book coming out in September called Muhammad, A Critical Biography, that tells the story of Muhammad from the Islamic sources, but also evaluates those sources historically. And the fundamental problem you have, if you think that Muhammad really existed, is that there isn't any indication that he did in the first century after he's supposed to have lived. Muhammad was supposedly born in 570 and died in 632. And in the 630s, right after he died, supposedly, the Arabs came pouring out of Arabia and embarked upon a series of military conquests that is unparalleled in human history. So you have the conquest of the Middle East, of North Africa, including Egypt. You have the conquest of Persia. You have the conquest of Sindh, which is now in Pakistan, but the beginning of the conquest of India. You have, by 100 years after Muhammad is supposed to have died, in 732, you have a massive empire stretching from Spain to India. Now, you would expect, since in the Quran as we have it today, and in Islamic tradition as we have it today, there is abundant material that justifies and even calls for conquest and subjugation of non-Muslims. And that's supposed to be what motivated these people to come out of Arabia and conquer all this territory. You would expect that they might have mentioned it. There are plenty of records. There's an abundance of records, most of it from the non-Muslims. But there is an abundance of records from the 7th century. We have, for example, the writings of Patriarch Sophronius of Jerusalem. In the days of the Arab conquest of Jerusalem, Jerusalem was technically part of the Roman Empire. But the Romans did not actually, after a series of exhausting wars with the Persians, they didn't actually have the troops to keep the whole, what they had on paper, they couldn't really hold. So Jerusalem was essentially governed by the Christian leader there, who was the Patriarch Sophronius. And Sophronius wrote a lot of sermons that he preached, and he left a lot of other theological writings. And in those writings, he discusses at length the Arab conquest of Jerusalem. And he's wondering about it from a theological standpoint. Why would God allow this? Why is he bringing these people who burned down all the churches and they treat the people terribly? Why have they come? Why is this happening? And in all the considerations that Sophronius has about the conquest of Jerusalem, he speaks a great deal about the conquerors. And he never once calls them Muslims, never once suggests or hints or gives any idea that they have a holy book or a prophet or a new religion. There's no mention of Muhammad. There's no mention of the Quran. There's no mention of Islam. And it's not just Sophronius. There are a few scattered mentions of Muhammad from around this time, but none of them correspond to what we have in Islamic tradition about Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam. There are a few coins that the Arabs struck in the period that I'm talking about. Now in the 640s, 650s, 660s, you have the Arab Empire starting to make its own coins. And some of them say Muhammad. And so a lot of people just assume, oh, see, they're talking about the Prophet Muhammad. The problem with that is that some of those coins actually have crosses on them. Now, why would this be a problem? Because in the Quran, in chapter 4, verse 157, it says that the Jews say, we have slain the Messiah, the son of Mary. But they did not kill him or crucify him. It seemed so to them. They thought they did, but they hadn't really done it. And what happened was, according to Islamic tradition, somebody else was made to resemble Jesus and crucified in his place. And it would be a great insult to Allah to say that one of his prophets, which is what the Quran thinks of Jesus, could suffer such a humiliating and ignominious defeat as to be crucified. So the crucifixion is kind of an insult in Islam. In Islamic tradition, there's a story that Muhammad says at the end of the world, Jesus will come back, break the cross, because it's an insult. It's not what really happened. And so the actual Islamic eschatology envisions that Jesus is going to come back and essentially destroy Christianity, break all the crosses. So why would, if these people revered Muhammad as a prophet and they had all these writings, why would they put crosses on the coins? And no Islamic apologist has ever come up with any adequate explanation of that. They say, oh, well, the early Islamic empires had a very light touch. They went very gently with the conquered people. But that's, if you go through human history, that's never the Islamic conquests actually are quite brutal and are transformative of the land, which is why so few of them have ever been rolled back. The people are thoroughly subjugated and Islamized. And we're supposed to believe that they acted in a completely different way with no argument and no discussion whatsoever right at the beginning of Islam. It strains credulity. So you have this massive absence of Muhammad. It's only 200 years after he died that you start getting this incredible proliferation of stories about what he did practically at every moment of his life. And then you've got to ask, how come you're only hearing about this now? If people, presumably, of course, this is all dismissed as, why didn't we hear about this before? Well, it was oral tradition. People had it all memorized. Well, okay. But you would think that sometime in all the time of those conquests in the 7th century, that somebody would have said, hey, why are you guys doing this? Why have you come to our land and you're conquering and raping and laying waste? And they might have said, well, we have this prophet Muhammad who said this stuff. And this book, the Quran, that says, fight them until religion is all for Allah. And all these things that ordinarily are understood as justifying Islamic aggression. And yet there's nobody seems to have any idea of it. So all this stuff, if they had it in their heads and it was oral tradition, they never spoke about it. They never gave any hint that it existed. They never mentioned it to anybody. And it's remarkable when you look at the actual mentions of the Arabs in the 7th century, they're never called Muslims. And nobody ever talks about the Prophet Muhammad. Like I said, there are a few scattered mentions of Muhammad, but they don't fit the Prophet, and nobody ever mentions the Quran. It's not until the 690s you start to get hints of what's to come.
That is, there. You put out so much there. There's so much I want to talk about, but we're gonna keep this to the subject. That what you laid out here is quite ironic to what Muslims would be claiming, because they claim that Islam is the first religion, and Moses, Jesus, Abraham, they were all Muslims. They were all Muslims. You need to understand, Moses was a Muslim. Why? Because he submitted to Allah. First of all, what strikes me is that in the Bible, not even once, not in the Gospels, nor in the Torah, 5 books of Moses, or in the Old Testament, there is no mention of the word Allah. No mention. So I have to ask the question, is it even the same God we're talking about? And I say that no, it's not even the same God, because God is very, very specific with what his name is, and according to Jews, and then according to Christianity, with the name Jesus now being inserted into the mix. But with Allah, there is no basis whatsoever for that name. So I'm like, this name just came out of nowhere, and then Muslims say it's the same name. But what's even more than that, and I'm tying this all together right now, and this is why this, what you're saying is so counter to what Muslims would have you believe, is that Abraham and Moses were Muslim, and Abraham went down, built the Kaaba. Abraham himself built the Kaaba, right? That's the claim of Muslims. And with Ishmael, was it? So that brings up so many contradictions, because in and of itself, the Quran says we get, and this is going to go back to one of your speeches that I listened to, and I was highly entertained because this is so interesting, that God created the Torah, gave it to the Jews, and then the Jews supposedly corrupted it, then gave the gospel to the Christians, and again, or to the Jews later to become Christians, and then corrupted it. That's why we have the final the final messenger of Allah, which is Muhammad and the Quran. This is the final message. Nobody can question this. Nobody can corrupt this. But the problem I find with that is, if Allah first went down and built, if Abraham went down as a Muslim, going down, build the Kaaba, what's with the Torah and what's with the gospel? Why would you need those things? Why not bring down the Quran? Because this is the only first religion before these other two, and fulfill as it should be. As also, I want to tie this into the last part, is that God gave to the Jews, I forgot to add this, God gave to the Jews the Torah, and they didn't fulfill it, and therefore the Gospels was necessary, and they didn't fulfill it, and therefore the Quran was necessary. That is the whole argument here. But the entire argument doesn't make any sense. What is with all the necessity? If you're going to build the Kaaba in the first place, what's with the necessity of the first and second temples? Why build that as well? It doesn't. The entire narrative falls apart so quickly. I know what you want to say, and because this is one of your speeches, I want you to talk about the Gospel of Barnabas, the entire thing. I want you to dismantle this argument that Islam is the first religion, the Kaaba was built by Abraham, and all the other, Jesus, Abraham, all the other ones were actually Muslims.
Well, that's what the Quran says. That in chapter 3, verse 67, it says it straight out that Abraham was a Muslim, and the other prophets are assumed to be Muslims. And so the Quran comes, and the Quran says of itself that it confirms the Torah and the Gospel. But then the Muslims out in the world later, they began to encounter actual Jews and Christians, and they found out that the Torah did not agree, and the Gospels did not agree with the Quran. And so they had two choices. One choice was to say, oh, well, I guess we were wrong, and the Quran does not confirm the Torah and the Gospel, but that would be denying Islam. So they couldn't say that. So they had to make up this story that the Jews and Christians had corrupted their scriptures. And this is not actually in the Quran, but it's the only way to make sense of what the Quran says. Because how could the Quran confirm the Torah and the Gospel when the Torah and the Gospel disagree with it? Well, the only explanation they've got is, well, you guys must have changed your books to take out the agreements with the Quran. And so the idea is that the prophets of the Bible are all Muslims, and they all taught Islam. And they got the Torah and the Gospel, which are different from what Jews and Christians think of. It's not the 5 books of Moses. It's a book that was given to Moses that teaches the same thing the Quran teaches. And the Gospel is not the accounts of the life and teachings of Jesus, which is what Christians understand. But it's a book that was given to Jesus, like the Quran was given to Muhammad. And these books, the Jews and Christians dared to tamper with. And they changed the word of Allah and made it into what we know of today as Judaism and Christianity. So Judaism and Christianity are false and illegitimate religions, the twisted versions of the original Islam. That's the mythology, but there's no basis for this in reality at all. It's just a way to explain all the various statements of the Quran.
Yeah, so to that, the counter argument is the Gospel of Barnabas. What is the Gospel of Barnabas?
The Gospel of Barnabas is supposed to be the original gospel. I first encountered it, as a matter of fact, years ago. These Muslims had a table out in New York City, and I was walking around. I lived there, and I saw this Gospel of Barnabas on the table and asked them about it, and bought a copy, and still got it in this office somewhere. They told me, and this is what many Muslims believe, that this is the actual gospel, that it's called the Gospel of Barnabas, but it's the real gospel that Allah gave to Jesus. It's the original book. and it's sort of a rewriting of the Gospels from an Islamic standpoint. That you have a lot of stories that are the same as the stories in the Gospels, except instead of people saying truly you are the Son of God and things like that don't fit with Islam, they proclaim him as a prophet, and Jesus goes around saying after me is going to come Muhammad and so on, and so it all fits into the Islamic framework. It's not a real thing. The Gospels date from the first century, but the Gospel of Barnabas is a medieval forgery from about 14 centuries later. It's just a work of Islamic apologetics that somebody put together to try to bamboozle people.
Do we know who wrote it?
I don't think so. Maybe, but I think it's anonymous. I guess Barnabas wrote it. Barnabas was one of the apostles. He's mentioned in the New Testament, but we have no writings of his coming down to us.
That is interesting. The reason why I'm bringing up the Gospel of Barnabas, because, Christians need to be able to combat any of, they're going to hear, oh, the word Gospel Barnabas. Oh, wait a minute. So this must be a Christian thing. And then they're going to be duped into believing, oh, look at that. It's a Christian gospel. Well, maybe there's something to this. No, you got to know that they're hiding what this is. This is actually not a real book. This is no relation to the actual original Gospels. This is something that they later on created in order to legitimize Islam. So that is, by the way, that is quite ironic to your point, what you made earlier, that Islam is actually a later on invention, and then you have another invention, the Gospel of Barnabas, to only legitimize the later invention. That's a pretty, that's pretty ironic, if I might say so. So all this is leading up to the main point of this discussion is because of I've seen this so-called alliance that people want to create. It's about Christianity and Islam, because there's certain, there are a lot of people who are professing to this or who are advocating for this who are bad people, just plain bad people. Then there are a lot of people who are like, hey, wait a minute, they believe in Allah, we believe in Jesus, so we believe both in more or less the same God. We should, we could have an alliance, end war and all this. And I'm all for ending war. I'm all for any good benefits that could come of any alliance. But this is utterly incompatible. I've just looked back to the history at Christianity and Islam, the attitude towards each other. And there's a fundamental disagreement and a fundamental basis of which this could not work. And because Islam, being a dominant religion, it seeks to dominate. As you can see, shall I display it right now? As you can see, throughout the Middle East, all the women who used to wear, modest clothes, but colorful clothes with gold around them, all kinds of beautiful things. But then nowadays, all these women are now completely black in burqas, put into burqas, completely dominated. Moroccan women, just look at how they look before and after when Islam dominated the country. You'll see they are, modestly dressed. All right, so I don't want to have this argument. No, the women were not. They were modestly dressed, but they were nicely dressed as well. But now they're all dominated. Let's go to the churches in Europe. I've seen so many times that churches allow Muslims to come in there and start praying to Allah. I'm like, aren't there enough mosques in Europe? Why do you need to go into a church and pray to Allah? It's domination and humiliation. That's what it is. Islam seeks to dominate. It's a dominant religion. So it's incompatible with Christianity, which is much more tolerant towards people. Islam seeks to dominate. It won't be able to work. Now, this is not just me putting out an agenda here. I want to go into the scriptures of what Islam teaches and how that goes against Christianity. Now, before I do that, I also want to lay out that for those who think that this alliance could work out, this is my problem. It's much more dangerous. I know Christians have issues with Jews rejecting Jesus, but I'm of the view that it's much more dangerous to have somebody who says that, no, we believe in Jesus, but we just don't believe he's God. I think that is a much more dangerous attitude towards the religion because it's subversive. When you reject the religion outright, it is the complete rejection of it. There's a boundary, there's a barrier, and everybody understands, okay, this is the barrier. Everybody knows where you're coming from. But when you say that, oh no, he didn't die on the cross, it was something else. Allah pulled a quick one on you. it was a trick. You need to no, it was a trick. Allah tricked you guys. You need to understand. Jesus is not God. No. He's not God. And I don't. Again, I'm Jewish, of course, but I'm talking from a Christian perspective. When you have them saying that Jesus is not God, then you're going to have a blurring of the religions, and there's not going to be a definitive barrier of where they're coming from, where you're coming from. And when you have a barrier and a blending of the religions, then the uniqueness of each religion gets tampered by the other. It's much like when the secularists want to mix up Hanukkah and Christmas. I'm a religious separatist. Leave them alone. Leave Hanukkah alone. Leave Christmas alone. Leave them holy. And I mean it in both words. Holy goes both ways. So this is where I'm coming from. I want to keep them separate. And I can't believe I'm saying this, separate but equal. I know. But yeah, separate but equal behind the law. But when you're gonna have Muslims who say no, we believe in it, we respect him, no, but he's not God, you're gonna see a chipping away of Christianity. Christianity is not gonna survive. Islam is going to survive. If this alliance happens this way, theologically speaking, Islam is going to survive because it's a dominant religion. Christianity is not going to survive. Now what do you think about this? And I want you to go into the scriptures of Islam of why this cannot work out, such an alliance. What's going to happen in the end times? As you already pointed out to one thing, that Jesus is going to come back and he's going to break the cross. I mean, that is pretty strong language, and a Christian should, as any Christian who hears that, should immediately be alerted by, whoa, what do you mean? What do you mean going to break the cross? You're going to reject the entire religion? You're going to break the churches? What are you going to do? That is not, I don't think that's just metaphorical. I don't think that's just literal. Jesus is going to break a cross. I think that it's more metaphorical, that something else is going to happen here. What do you think about this?
Well, the whole passage says Jesus will come back and break the cross, kill the pig, and abolish the jizya. The jizya is a special tax that the subjugated people pay to the Muslims to acknowledge their humiliation and disgrace because they've rejected Islam and their inferiority and subjugated status under the hegemony of the Muslims. And so Jesus will abolish that. That means at the end of the world, there will be no more half measures. It's not going to be that you can live as a Jew or a Christian as long as you pay the tax and submit to the degradation. You have to either become a Muslim or you'll be killed. And so that's the one thing. Kill the pigs because the Christians don't obey the food laws that the Jews and the Muslims obey, or are at least stipulated to obey. And so consequently, that will be ended. And the pigs will be killed so that the Christians don't eat pork anymore. And break the cross means that the Christianity as we know it as a religion will be destroyed, and nobody will be preaching Christ crucified anymore. That will be done away with. So Christianity will be completely destroyed, and everybody who is Christian will either become Muslim or be killed and sent to hell. That's the end times vision of Islam. And so a lot of these things, I've seen these people saying, Christians saying, we have so much more in common with the Muslims than with the Jews. We should stop talking about the Judeo-Christian tradition. I've seen this especially after October 7th, when there's been this terrible explosion of anti-Semitism. I see a lot of Christians saying, for decades, we've spoken about the Judeo-Christian tradition. That's bogus. We should throw that out. The Muslims are much closer to us, but they don't realize what is in the Quran about Christianity. Not only is there the Hadith, the tradition that we've just been talking about Jesus coming back and breaking the cross, and not only does the Quran say that he was not crucified, the Quran says that the Jews say Ezra is the son of Allah. Now, there are no Jews that actually say Ezra is the son of Allah. Not one has ever been found.
I can fact check you. That is correct. No Jew, especially Orthodox Jews, would ever say that, because we don't believe that there is a son of God. It's just as simple as that. It seems as though Muhammad, again, or whoever wrote the Quran, found something, I don't know, maybe found some kind of sect of Jews. There were a lot of little sects throughout. So maybe he found some sect and then was like, oh, okay, this is what all Jews believe.
But if this was a sect, it's completely vanished without a trace. Nobody's
Exactly.
ever found any indication that any Jews ever thought this. But that's what the excuse me. It's what the Quran says, so Muslims believe it. And the passage goes on. This is chapter 9, verse 30. Says, and the Christians say Jesus is, excuse me, the Christians say Jesus is the Son of Allah. And these are sayings from their mouths. They don't know. They are under the curse of Allah for saying this. And so the Quran is actually saying that if you are an ordinary Christian who believes that Jesus is the Son of God, which is, it would be tough to find a Christian who did not say that. That's kind of basic Christianity. So pretty much all 100% of the Christians are actually under Allah's curse just for being Christian. That's one problem with the whole idea of making common cause. Another is the divinity of Christ, which the whole idea of salvation in Christianity is based upon. That God became man in order to forgive the sins of mankind. Only God can do that. And so the Quran twice says in chapter 5, verse 17 and 572 that they are unbelievers who say that Allah is the Messiah, Jesus the Son of Mary. And so they're ruling out Christianity, saying you're an unbeliever and you're under Allah's curse. And then you're going to make common cause with them. Now, the insidious aspect of this, one of the many insidious aspects of this, is that while they are denigrating Christianity in all these ways, also warning people about the Trinity. The Quran doesn't understand the Trinity, thinks that the Trinity consists of Allah, Jesus, and Mary, his mother, but it nonetheless warns Christians not to affirm the Trinity and says it will be better for you not to say this, not to say three. But the
Yes, about that, I've seen a lot of Muslims, and David Wood actually made an interesting video about this. I'm Jewish. I just want to make this clear. I'm Jewish, so I reject that as well. But that is a clear definition on which Christians could now draw upon, and then convince me otherwise. Okay, so I just want to make sure everybody understands this. But he made it a very interesting video that a Muslim said that 1 + 1 + 1 = 1. So the Muslim was trying to make fun of Christianity, that Christianity believes that 1 + 1 + 1 = 1 when it actually should be 3. But then David Wood made a video countering that, saying that when you have 1 + 1 + 1 bricks laid out 100 times, then you have one house. So you have one entity. So I can conceptualize that. So it seems as though, so I have to say that, yeah, it does seem that Islam has a very hard time trying to understand Christianity, and vice versa. A lot of Christians who are more tolerant, they fulfill what Jesus said about love and all the other things, they have a hard time understanding how dangerous Islam is because they are much more tolerant. So Islam has a problem. This is what I see. Islam has a problem with Christianity because it is so intolerant of other religions that it needs to subjugate you. You need to pay the jizya. You need to be, and we'll get into more detail into that. So it's so intolerant that it has a hard time understanding Christianity, and Christianity suffers from the opposite, that it has a hard time understanding Islam, or at least Christians have a hard time understanding Islam, saying that nobody can be this evil. Nobody can be that terrible. It's not, I can't condemn this entire religion. I'm like, listen, the Prophet Muhammad, he had sex with a 9-year-old. I mean, he was a pedophile. Can we at least agree on that? No, you can't even say that. And if you do, then you're gonna get crucified. So you see, when this is what I see. Christians who are good, well-meaning Christians who have bought the Islamic idea that no, we're just trying to be, we just want some tolerance. They would never extend, and we're not talking about secular Muslims, that they're a subject for a completely different matter. We're talking about the Muslims who actually fulfill what the Quran says. They would never extend that same olive branch to Christians once they gain power. They're like the democratic socialists. We're just going to win elections. We're socialists. We're not going to do, but we're not going to do revolution. We're just going to win elections. And once they get into power, that's when the violence starts. The same is here. The Islam is saying, we're not going to do any violence. We just want some tolerance. You give them the tolerance, then they gain power, and that's when the violence starts. That's what it seems is going on here.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, a lot of Christians, especially leftists, they don't really understand the implications of what they're doing. But some very high level Christians, like the former Archbishop of Washington, D.C., McCarrick, who got in a lot of trouble in other ways, he affirmed that Muhammad was a prophet. And other Christian leaders have done this. It's really stupid to do that because you can't really say that Muhammad is a prophet
That's
without
blasphemy.
saying that he's got prophecy. And if you're saying he's got prophecy, you're saying that the Quran is true, and yet the Quran contradicts the Gospels in numerous ways. And so these naive Christians, they affirm this, thinking that they're being open-minded and tolerant, and they don't understand that it will never be reciprocated, and that they're compromising their own faith by doing this.
They seek to pacify an enemy that would never be content. And again, I want to make this clear. We're not talking about, and this is what I believe about Islam, that the secular Muslims, it's better for you to believe in some gods, have some base morality than not to believe in anything, than to be a hedonist, a nihilist. So to the secular Muslims, we're not talking about you. We're talking about who are fundamental in their belief of Islam, because it is flawed just by its own admission. It has parts. Correct me here. Does the Quran or the Hadith have a Talmudic verse?
That's the Quran, chapter 5, verse 30.
I mean, this is the most... sorry, because this is the most hilarious thing I can find out there, because I see the Muslims constantly condemning the Talmud because they fundamentally misunderstand the Talmud, because, again, written 2,000 years ago in a language that they don't speak, to rabbis, just opinions on rabbis. It's a whole completely different can of worms, which I've addressed multiple times. But if you're going to condemn the Talmud, then aren't you by proxy condemning your own holy book, the Quran? Because it's literally, even if it has just one verse, then if you're condemning the Talmud, then it has by proxy been condemned your own holy book. So this is what it baffles the mind when you see Islam condemning the Talmud. It just doesn't make any sense. I would like to know, where does this even come from? Where did this Talmudic verse make its way into the Quran?
Well, like I say, it's chapter 5, verse 32, and I'll get it here. It says, "For that reason we decreed for the children of Israel that whoever kills a human being for anything other than manslaughter or corruption on the earth, it will be as if he had killed all mankind. And whoever saves the life of one person, it will be as if he has saved the life of all mankind." That is the favorite verse of people like presidents of the United States and other non-Muslim leaders. They take it out of context and they think that the Quran is saying that if you kill one person, it's like you've killed all of mankind. The Quran is not laying that down as a general rule. The Quran is saying, we decreed for the children of Israel that they should not do this, that they should, if they kill one person, it's like killing all mankind. So this is a very particular command for the Jews only. And the Quran is very clear about that. And this passage in the Quran is really just criticizing the Jews for not keeping Allah's word. It's not laying down some wonderful moral precept, as it's often represented as being. This is the favorite verse of ill-informed non-Muslims in the Quran, because they don't know. They think, oh, it's saying you shouldn't kill. It's not. Anyway, it goes on. "Our messengers came to them of old with clear proofs, but afterwards, indeed, many of them committed excesses on earth." And then this following verse 33, "The only reward for those who make war upon Allah and his messenger and struggle to sow corruption on earth will be that they will be killed or crucified, or have their hands and feet cut off on opposite sides, or be expelled from the land. Such will be their degradation in this world, and in the hereafter theirs will be an awful doom." So you got the quote there, and that is from, I know I have it in the footnote, or I thought I did. It is Mishnah Sanhedrin. "As regards Cain, who killed his brother, the Lord addressing him does not say, 'The voice of thy brother's blood crieth out,' but 'the voice of his bloods,' meaning not his blood alone, but that of his descendants. And this to show that since Adam was created alone, so that he kills an Israelite is by the plural here used, counted as if he had killed all of mankind. He who saves a single Israelite is counted as if he had saved the whole world." So this is just cribbed from that Talmudic passage?
It's the most hilarious thing you could find out. You could find out there that they would take from, again, the Talmud. I know most people don't know what the Talmud is. The Talmud is both the Gemara and the Mishnah, which is both together are the Talmud. So the Gemara is commentary on the Mishnah. The Mishnah is commentary on the commandments of the 5 books of Moses and the Old Testament. So, and that is the Jewish ritualistic law which Jesus rejected. So that is more or less a quick rundown of what that is. So it is quite hilarious. Why is this so funny? Is because Muslims, knowing how terrible the Quran and Hadiths are, need to condemn and say, no, look over there. See over there, the Jews, they got a book called the Talmud. You need to look over there. But wait a minute, you guys have copied the Talmud. Wait a minute, this really much doesn't make any sense. So the funny thing about this is that you can see from here that, again, we see here, if Muhammad actually existed, which, again, I believe that he did, just for the record. But your theory on this is highly interesting, and I think more study into this is warranted. But at the moment, I still believe that Muhammad existed. So, again, it does seem that Muhammad just made it up as he went. He met some Christians, and then, okay, you guys say this. Okay, I'm going to write this down. Okay, you guys say this. And then met some Jews from some cult or whatever. Okay, you Jews say this. And then found Orthodox Jews who actually followed the Talmud and said, okay, what is this? Oh, this is a new thing. Okay, I'm going to write this down. Not knowing that you're taking from a whole array of opinions, things that conflict with each other, because you cannot take the Talmud. It's impossible to take the Talmud and then take the Gospels and say, I'm going to try to make this work. One is a rejection of the other. Pick a lane, choose a lane. It's fine. You can choose one, but you got to choose one. You can't choose both because they're incompatible with each other. Not because of any evil or any bad advice or anything like that, just because one is a rejection of the other, which is fine. It's vigorous debate. We can have vigorous debate, but you got to pick a lane. Otherwise, it just doesn't compute at all. So this goes back. I want to tie this back to the entire conversation of Chrislam, the Islamic Christian Alliance. I wanted to bring this up also, that how fast Christians have forgotten about the Crusades, the point of that, which was to keep Christianity in Europe, because Islam was on its way to dominate Christianity. And of course, it started just in the Middle East, but then it went up to Turkey, and they wanted to Anatolia, they wanted more. And it continued on to the Balkans. The Christians had to put a stop to it. And I actually kind of jumped the gun there, because it much later on happened that they took the Balkans, much later on. I know that. Don't worry, I'm not historically illiterate. But the Crusades, the First Crusade, Second Crusade, it was because Islam was seeking to dominate Christians in the Holy Land. They were attacking Christians, and the Christians were, no, this is our holy sites. Islam were saying, no, for some reason, their holy sites, because of the story, Muhammad and the flying donkey or whatever that flew over to there. I'm like, and we still don't know we don't even know if it actually was Jerusalem, because it said I don't remember the farthest mosque of, I don't remember which is the Al-Aqsa. The problem is Al-Aqsa is found actually in Saudi Arabia at the time. It was this one that the Quran, that Muslims claim, and the one in Jerusalem was built about 70 or 67 years after Muhammad. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think that is the time frame on that. So it can't be that. So the actual Al-Aqsa is actually in Saudi Arabia, but then they say, no, it's that one. No, it's actually not that one. But so we have this. So go ahead.
The farthest mosque. All Al-Aqsa means is the farthest mosque. It's in chapter 17, verse 1 of the Quran, that Muhammad journeyed from the Masjid al-Haram, the mosque in Mecca, to the farthest mosque, Al-Aqsa. And so people assume nowadays, because there's an Al-Aqsa mosque on the Temple Mount, that that's where he went. But that wasn't built yet during his lifetime. So I think that's just another indication that these stories were written later, and that they didn't know the Al-Aqsa Mosque wasn't there, so they put it in the Quran that he went to the Al-Aqsa. But it could have been any farthest mosque. Farthest is a relative term. So it depends on where you are, which mosque is farthest away. We don't know which one it was.
And
But that is the basis of the Islamic claim to Jerusalem.
exactly. I wanted to get to that. This is why they claim that Jerusalem, and Palestine. This is our holy land or anything. No, it's not. It's Christians' holy land and Jews' holy land. It's not Islam. Islam has no basis whatsoever in Jerusalem. And to colonize it, to use a leftist term, they colonize it by calling Al-Quds. That's what they call Jerusalem. Jerusalem has a very definitive name. It's in the Bible and in the Gospels. Okay, it is. I mean, talk about colonization. I immediately, the moment they use Al-Quds, I'm like, okay, it's over. We're not gonna do that here because this is Jerusalem. You can call it Jerusalem. You could even if you want, you could say, no, actually, this is fine. You want to make your argument, you can make your argument. You're gonna call it what it actually is. Don't try to gaslight me. So what this is about, what we're talking about here right now, is that the dominant religion of Islam, the Crusades trying to defend Christians from making the pilgrimages to the Holy Land. You have later on that Islam. This is the evils of Islam. Again, I promise we're gonna get to the evils of Islam. So we have, and this is to talking to Christians. You want to make an alliance with them? Here, listen what Islam did. They captured Christian children, castrated them, then used them, trained them, and turned them into soldiers called the Janissaries, defending Islam. I mean, that's perverse if I ever heard it. What?
That was the Ottomans in the Ottoman Empire.
Yes.
That wasn't generally done elsewhere. But it was something that was practiced for quite several centuries in the Ottoman Empire. And it was on the basis of religion. The Islamic overlords would do this, go into the Christian villages and make all the families come and then take the eldest sons.
And is this anywhere linked into Islamic ideology, into Islamic prophecy?
Convert the children to Islam. No, not a prophecy, but it was just a declaration of supremacy that they had the right to do this, that the Christians were subjugated. And if the Islamic overlords demanded this, then they had to go along. And so they would convert these children to Islam and then train them up to be the crack troops that they would often send back into their own areas to rule or to put down an uprising or something of that kind. And this was kind of another gesture of humiliation.
Exactly.
Their own children coming back to fight against them.
Yes, that is the core word that I wanted to get at, humiliation, because it's not just an outsider conquering you. That's just the way of the world. I mean, especially for the time, it makes sense. That's the law of war. But this is not just an outsider. This is your children going to revolt against you, and they're going to kill you, rape you, and they're gonna conquer you, and you're going to submit to, and not on their own accord. They're going to do it on behalf of our accord. They're going to serve us. They're not even serving themselves. So that is, I mean, the word perverse, it's a perverse of a perversion of the rule of war. As much as war rules there are out there, that's a perversion of it, I would have to say. So you have that going on. Then what you have is the Muhammad taking. I don't remember how many sex slaves did Muhammad have. I know he had 7 wives. How many? And then he had sex slaves.
13 or 15, depending on whether you count some of them as sex slaves. And the number of the sex slaves is not known for sure. The main one was Maria the Copt, who was an Egyptian Christian girl who was sent to him by the ruler of Egypt as a kind of tribute. And then there was Safiya bint Huyai, who was a Jewish woman who was captured at Khaybar when Muhammad massacred the Jews at the Khaybar oasis. They were there because he had exiled them earlier from Medina, but then he went to massacre them where they had gone for refuge after he exiled them. And he killed her husband, he killed her father, I believe maybe her brother as well, and then he took her for his wife, consummated the marriage, that is, raped her right there on the battlefield with the dead bodies all around. And this is just one of many.
Since Jesus was a Muslim, did Jesus do any of that? Yeah. So yeah, of course, that is a rhetorical question because that goes to show the lunacy of anybody who wants to believe that Jesus was a Muslim and Muhammad. I'm not even talking about Islam didn't exist back then. I'm not even talking about that. I'm just talking about the pure behavior between the two people here. Look at Jesus's behavior and look at Muhammad's behavior, completely different. Which also brings me to Muhammad Hijab. I'm sure you know he's one of the most respected Muslim scholars, I guess you could call, who is a Muslim apologist. He was asked this question, and I don't know if you have heard this, but if you haven't, this is going to blow your mind. He was asked the question, if Jews and Muslims can get along. And he said, of course can Jews and Muslims can get along. Look at Muhammad's wife. She was a Jew. Mm-hmm. Okay, did you get that? Did you get what he did? That admission, most people won't pick up on what he actually said there. Muhammad's wife was a Jew. That exact same Jew we just talked about, otherwise known as a sex slave, killed the parents, killed her parents, and forced into sex. Okay, so what is the theme of this? The theme of this is that you're going to be dominated by Islam. What did Muhammad Hijab just prove to you? He said, of course we can get along. You're going to be dominated by us because you're going to become our sex slaves. That's the admission. That I am not misrepresenting what he said. That is his pure words without out of context. It's perfectly within context what he said. This is what he said. You're going to be dominated. This is how we're going to get along.
That's right. The Quran directs the Muslims to fight against Jews and Christians until they pay the jizya, which is the tax, with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. This is chapter 9, verse 29. And so the idea is that the Jews and Christians can live as Jews and Christians, but they are subservient to the Muslims. And whatever, if the Muslims come and demand all their firstborn sons or whatever, they have to go along. And so they are completely subjugated. Then they can get along great. As long as they understand they don't have any rights that are not contingent upon the will of the Muslims and can be revoked at any time, then they'll get along fine.
And we're reaching to the end of this. But I have one more question, because I want to end this on a high note, because of course we have to talk about this. There are certain, and not every Muslim believes in this. Okay, so I want to make sure that I do not want to misrepresent anybody's religion. That's why I have on people who actually know what they're talking about when it comes to religion. So I just want to make sure that not every Muslim believes this. So some Muslims reject this, but Aisha, who was Muhammad's wife, who was 6 years old when he 7 or 6. 6 years old, and then 9 years old when he consummated the marriage, as the hadith, and that is in the hadith, as the hadith says that she was playing with dolls, and so on and so forth. People could look this up for themselves. So, but not all Muslims believe this. A lot of them just reject that outright. But then they have problems because those same sources confirm other things, which then they would have to reject that as well. So it brings into conflict a lot of other things, but that's not the discussion. Interesting for now. But what is the interesting for now in this alliance between Islam and Christianity trying to build? When you have the head of your religion, who is Muhammad, and he is supposed to be the gold standard of behavior, what he does, that is the gold standard, because he's the final prophet. He's as perfect as a human being could be. Having sex slaves, killing people, beheading people, forcing them, spreading Islam by the sword, and being the pedophile that he was. And most people say, well, he had also grown wives, so it can't be a pedophile. No. There's exclusive pedophilia, and then there is non-exclusive pedophilia. He seems to be non-exclusive, but he definitely was a pedophile. This is the gold standard. People who don't understand, what is the big deal here? What about King David? King David killed some person and took his wife. Yeah, but we don't say that is the gold standard. We are saying that is a negative. God punished him. That's the whole point. We're saying whenever we see any of the Jews in the Old Testament who are sinning, we are making a clear distinction. Hey, this person is sinning. This is not good. This is bad. And we're making a definite point about this. But when Islam or when Muhammad does these things, it's actually the gold standard, and you can't criticize this. This is the defining feature than what most people say, oh, look at these other people. No, you're saying that he's the gold standard. This is his behavior. What you're saying, this is the gold standard of behavior. what is your view on this? If the Christianity and Islam could ever reconcile such a great gap?
No, there's no way. Because what you're saying is standard Islam. It's not just opinion. Chapter 33, verse 21 of the Quran says Muhammad is the excellent example. And there's no qualification on it. It doesn't say he's the excellent example in these circumstances, but not in those, or except when he sins or something like that. It's just the excellent example. And so that's taken in a maximalist way in Islamic tradition and understood to mean whatever he does is good. So if he married the 6-year-old and consummated the marriage when she was 9, then that's good. And this is why this question matters. You're absolutely right. These are strong hadith. It's mentioned several times in the hadith collections that Muslim scholars consider most reliable and that form the basis of Islamic doctrine. And so the Muslims who say, no, these are not authentic, they don't really have a solid leg to stand on, because these are in the collections of hadiths that are considered the ones that Muslims can trust. And so why is it that they suddenly can't trust these things when it comes to Aisha? Because they don't want to, because it's embarrassing, because it makes people think ill of Muhammad. That's why, not because there's really any basis in Islamic theology for rejecting it. But the only reason why this matters, otherwise, who would care what this man did so long ago, is because he's the excellent example. And because Muslims imitate him. You go to Afghanistan today, pretty much every girl over the 3rd grade age is married. And some of them earlier than that. When the aid workers were when the U.S. troops were in Afghanistan and we had refugee camps and so on, aid workers would go in there and find these little girls, ages 9, 10, so on, all married. And so this causes health problems and psychological problems for little girls. And this is why this matters. When you say this man is a perfect example and everything he does is right, and he does this terrible thing, and therefore Muslims imitate him and do it, this is why this becomes an issue. And it's been completely obscured, really, in all the back and forth with Islamic apologists in the West saying, he didn't really do this, or she was really 19 or 29 or 50 or whatever. It's been the problem has been completely forgotten, that this only matters because little girls are suffering today because of Muhammad. And so if Muslims really oppose this, they need to first start by admitting that this really is what their mainstream tradition says, and that there are numerous Islamic scholars. I've got the list at my website, jihadwatch.org. I've published it many times. Many, many Islamic authorities around the world today saying there's no minimum age for girls to marry. You can marry an infant, and this is all because of Muhammad's example.
This is like one of the most fundamental basic understandings that Christians would have to understand, because correct me if I'm wrong, does the New Testament say that you shall not harm children, you'd rather be put in a millstone? Is that
so Jesus says anybody who causes any of these children to suffer, it would be like a millstone is put around his neck and he's thrown into the sea.
So that is a complete, the gap is so wide, but yet we have Christians who are trying to build a coalition. Why? Mostly it's because those terrible, terrible Jews, but then there are others who are like, yeah, we should get along. I'm like, listen, you have Muslim friends, don't attack them. Don't do that. But, it's theologically speaking, it's irreconcilable. You have your beliefs, they have their beliefs. Don't attack them for it, but you can have normal discussions with them. But this alliance, it's never going to happen. And if you try to make it happen, you're going to be dominated. And I want to finish with this last part. That nowadays what you see is that they see that they can't say that those hadiths are not worth looking into. They're fake. They can't do that. What you have is Muhammad Hijab, Daniel Kikuchu, and all the others are now justifying it. These are multiple videos, and they're saying, and how they're justifying it is that no, this is a marriage. You need to understand, it's a marriage. It's not just for the pleasure of sex. It's a marriage, and it's not just some pedophile going behind the trailer and touching little kids. It's a marriage, so it's a building block of society. I'm like, no, no, you don't get to reframe this. This is pedophilia, and Muhammad was a degenerate. So that's basic. I mean, there's no other way around it. So this Chrislam, this Islamic Christian Alliance, I see this as utterly preposterous. You would look into what Islam believes. You see, it's irreconcilable with Christianity. It's just irreconcilable. If Christians do not want to be dominated by Islam, you're going to have to make a clear distinction. You're going to have to protect Europe from Islam. And also, by the way, this is my anti-war voice speaking. Stop bombing the Middle East. Get out of there. Stop bombing it. That's just me. Stop killing Muslims, but also don't let them into your countries. Let them, whoever converts to Islam, that is their business. But stop with this illegal immigration to Europe, turning it into a third world hellhole. And the same is with the United States. It needs to stop immediately, because you're only going to be dominated. There's no reconciling the two. Anyway, this discussion has been very deep, very good. And after we're done here, after the recording, I just want to talk to you a moment. So, where can people find you? Where can they want, if they want to learn more, they want to know more? Because, as a matter of fact, your sources up till some point was used to train the FBI and CIA. Correct me if I'm wrong, CIA maybe, but intelligence agencies, in order to prepare themselves for what Islam is like. So this is a high-value stuff we're talking about. So where can people find you? Where can people look into your sources, buy your books? 28 books, guys, and this one's the 29th, right? You're having now.
This is the new one. It's number 28, actually.
Oh, so this is the 28th.
Yeah, the 29th actually is all done and will be out next year.
Oh.
It's about anti-Semitism. But
so
right now, this is the one coming up.
Muhammad, a critical biography.
Yes.
So where can people find you, your website, and all the other things that you're putting out?
Yeah, jihadwatch.org. That's JIHAD watch.org. And that's a news site, many times daily updated with news about jihad you're not going to hear anywhere else. And then I'm at Jihad Watch RS on Twitter. And you can get the books at Amazon. There's a full list at the website Jihad Watch, and so there it is. You get it all. You can get. I've got the Critical Quran, which is a translation of the Quran that's clear and honest, unlike most of them, with commentary to help you understand how Muslims actually do understand the book according to mainstream Islamic theology. And another.
I'm gonna have to get myself one of those. I think I am. Yeah, I think I am.
Find it useful. And then this other book, The History of Jihad, which there is no other history of jihad that I know of, that covers 1,400 years of jihad activity, shows you how Muslims have acted consistently with the martial verses in the Quran throughout their history, giving the lie to the people who say, oh, no, that's not really how Muslims understand these passages.
All right. For those who want to reach out to me, you can reach out to me at AaronPolitidoxy on Twitter or at Aaron Friedman on Instagram. You can email me at politidoxy@gmail.com. Remember to share this episode, leave 5 likes, subscribe. Everybody knows all the other things. The most important thing you can do is share. And remember, my fellow radicals, stay political.